So I was doing the Daily Wire election night coverage, and I found myself talking to Megyn Kelly, as one often does. And
by the way, I thought you were one of the three most beautiful women on that coverage.
I felt so too. I think that if Jeremy Boring had shaved his beard, he would have run away with it instead of coming in first by a margin. And during that conversation came down to, at least my argument on it was the message, right? Is that everybody knows what the Democratic message is. What is the Republican message? Yeah. The Republican message is we're not Democrats. Okay. And I occasionally, just through random sounds that are emitted, like just like 10,000 chimps at typewriters, every now and then something comes out of my mouth that actually makes a little bit of sense. And one of the things that I said just spontaneously just occurred to me, and even when I got it out of my mouth, I thought, there's something to that. I said, when I was chatting with Megs, I said, there are millions and millions and millions of people out there who voted for Joe Biden because of their deep, deep love of Bobby Kennedy.
Yeah.
Right. I thought that was exactly it. People voted for Joe Biden because of how much they love Bobby Kennedy, and people voted for Fetterman despite the fact that he's just not there because they love Bobby Kennedy, or whatever you want to make it, or Obama. There was because the Democratic Party message is so intact and so clear that it doesn't matter who their candidates are. They're not voting for candidates. They're voting for the idea,
the image.
They're voting for the what's the brand, because they know what the brand is.
Yes.
And so you've got five now. You've got five high-level Democratic politicians who cannot function intellectually. You've got Fetterman, you've got Feinstein, you've got Biden, you've got Pelosi, and Kamala. Four of them with brain damage, and one of them who just was never really there to begin with. Okay, but these people are known to be absolutely, let's just say, for the sake of being as polite as possible, below par in terms of what you would expect from politicians. And they're all Democrats. And the reason they're all Democrats is because they don't vote, because the candidates don't matter. The message does. Now, this is where I think the Democrats are absolutely right. I think their message is appalling, but I think the principle is absolutely correct.
Yes.
Right? What is the message? And what we learned on election 2022 was that there was no Republican message. I talked to Mike Knowles about this, and he said, well, the message depends on the candidate. I said, well, it shouldn't depend on the candidate. The candidate should be there to support the message. And the message is not something that when I say the message, I mean, why do you have an R after your name? Why are you a Republican? What does that mean?
That's not how it works. And it hasn't worked that way for a long time. I made a note to myself that said, there is no national Republican Party. There are only candidates who wear the label. You put on the lapel pin.
I couldn't agree more.
And the Republican Party doesn't really have any hygiene powers. Only in very rare situations can a local committee say, no, you're not one of us. But in most cases, people who run as Republicans are self-appointed, and they step up. And if they can rally a few major fundraisers and a couple of supporters on the local committee, they can get enough backing they just have a handful of signatures in most cases to get on the ballot and call themselves a Republican. There's no good housekeeping seal of approval, and Republican parties, in essence, at the local, state, and national level, basically concede to the momentum. So they basically, okay, well, this guy's already there, and now we got to get behind him.
Years ago, Jay Cost, a political writer, made a really kind of sublime point about our Congress. We don't have a parliamentary system in this country where the parties are supreme within the body, and the executive branch doesn't exist. You pluck ministers out of the parliament, and so there actually is a party line for all of this. Our Congress is actually a meeting house for 435 separate little regions, each with its own character and each with its own interests, and it's very difficult unless you've got a real structure to enforce any kind of party unity. And the Republicans are particularly bad at this, as you guys just described.
Yeah, but this is, I mean, look, it's slightly different, at least in terms of what I'm thinking of. First of all, I completely agree that I would much rather have our system than a parliamentary system. I like the fact that there's 435 individuals. In fact, I'd like the idea if there weren't any parties at all. The idea, like in England, in Britain, you can vote for Labour and you don't even know who that representative is going to be. You just know they're going to plunk a person down because it's a party vote. That system sucks, right? Yeah. But I'm not talking so much about the mechanics of how it works politically. I'm talking about the brand. I'm talking about the brand. If I say to you guys, woke, right? You may not agree with woke, but you know what it is, and you know what the value set is, and you either agree with that value set or you don't. So what is the Republican version of that? What are we all about? What is the message? What are we selling? Nobody knows.
And who waves that flag? Who's the banner waver for, like, in your system, what you're suggesting, which I agree with? It's like, okay, well, there's no Republican Party. There's 435 independent people who decide to caucus with one party or the other in Congress. Like they're all Bernie Sanders, essentially. But so if it's not the elected official, who is it? What's her name? Rona. Is her name Rona? Who's the RNC chair?
I don't know. And I don't care.
Yeah.
But anyway, who's that person who becomes the standard bearer? The last time I remember anybody trying to do that was Michael Steele, and they ran him out of town on a rail.
I'm not talking about that.
This is not about a person. It's not about a standard bearer. It's not about who's the champion. It's not about who's the spokesman. It's like what
it's the brand.
We cannot agree on what it is that we are for, and so we always become the party of what we're against. The other point I made that night was, if you look at elections, presidential elections, a little more focused. This applies as well to legislative appointments, but the presidency is a little clearer, right? If you look at presidential elections, you will find that there are some elections where people come out to vote for somebody, and there are other elections when they come out to vote against somebody, right? Take 2004, okay? 2004, whichever side you voted for nobody's like, geez, George Bush, greatest guy ever. It's like nobody's excited about George Bush the way they're excited about Ronald Reagan. Right? Nope. And nobody's excited about John Kerry the way they're excited about John Kennedy or Bobby Kennedy. That was a case of which one of these guys do you hate the most? Okay? But if you look at Reagan, people came out for Reagan. People came out for Obama. I don't think Biden is a vote for candidate. I think Biden is a vote against candidate. And Kennedy was certainly a vote for candidate. So the power of having a vote for candidate, right? Somebody who you want to go out and vote for rather than go out and try to block, is how you win big. And if you look at Reagan's two wins, if you look at 1984, he's 5,000 votes away from running the table.
Yeah.
He's fine. I mean,
if he had a campaign in Minnesota, he could have run the table. He chose not to because it was two reasons. One, he didn't want to. Reagan actually did not want to tie George Washington by winning every state. I mean, he's just a gentleman and into
really?
That, really.
Did he? Is there some? He really kind of like threw it almost.
Well, he didn't throw it. He didn't campaign there.
Okay. Well, his absence in the state meant that 5,000 people managed to show up.
If he had chosen to campaign in Minnesota, he probably could have won it.
Okay. But the point of it is, right, is that Reagan came out and Reagan had a message, and the message is Morning in America. And now we start getting into the aspect of what is it that the power to win is a combination of a clear message and a great candidate. And Reagan not only had the message, there was nothing about Ronald Reagan that you could hate. You may not even like his policies. You could hate his policies. It's very difficult to hate the man because he didn't seem to have a mean bone in his body. Even when he was making fun of the Democrats, he was doing it with a joke and a smile, and he was making fun of himself about as often as he was doing that. Right. So when you have Obama's a great example on the other side. When you have a person who is able to deliver that message and the message is clear and they're able to put that message into an attractive package, then there's no way to stop that. That's an automatic win, and it's a big win. Right. And we've been looking at these like, oh, well, this candidate, that candidate, that candidate. No, it's like, what is the message? The reason DeSantis did so well is because DeSantis didn't even have the message, except for the fact that DeSantis had 2 years of actions stopping woke politics. So DeSantis won big because he's the anti-woke guy. And he's a capable governor. He's a competent guy, and he doesn't let the press determine his outcome. What's that?
I think competence is DeSantis's brand.
Yeah, and
right.
I have a quote from the guy who used to be DeSantis's emergency management chief, who was a Democrat and has since run for office. But he said, Democrats have sold a narrative that he, meaning DeSantis, did a terrible job. Well, you don't win by 19 points because you did a terrible job. People are buying what he's selling. And then in that same, I believe, New York Times story, DeSantis said, we set out a vision, we executed on that vision, and we produced historic results. And so what you're talking about, that sense of I've got an overriding vision about what this is all about, this is how I'm going to carry that out, and here are the results. The challenge is, and I agree with you, I don't want a party as we've had for the last several years that's so focused on one guy that we forget about what we stand for. But somehow, like, where is the execution element of that vision if you're just saying, well, this is kind of a disembodied ideology, which I cling to, but who's the bearer of that? And it could be a lot of people, but how does that happen?
So if I were to take a look, if it was my job to craft the message, right, this is what Republicans stand for. Right. And I would look very carefully at a 20-point win in the state of Florida. I saw a number of DeSantis's ads, but the one that was most powerful by far is just regular people. And you can tell they're regular people because they're not super smooth on camera, even though they only have one line. Right. Here's a firefighter who said, you protected us when we were, you went to bat for the policeman said you went to bat for us when they were trying to defund the police. And a kid said, you let us go to school when all the other schools in the country were closing down. Right. And basically what they said, you did this, and this is what things you did. And these are all good. And you ran the state effectively. And now he's turned Florida into a machine. It's not purple anymore. It's red across the board. There are no Democratic representatives on a national level.
Statewide. Statewide office. It's
when he ran for office the first time, Democrats enjoyed a slight registration advantage. Since then, Republicans now enjoy a 300,000 plus registration advantage. And DeSantis won 62 out of 67 counties. Charlie Crist did not win his home county.
And DeSantis won Miami-Dade, right?
Yeah, he won.
Which is, look, Miami-Dade is close. Virtually all of Florida, right? Almost all of Florida is if you win Miami-Dade, it's like winning California in a national election. You are so far ahead; it's an enormous advantage. He flipped Miami-Dade from, I think, +7 for Biden to +11 for him. So it's a huge thing, right? So what is it now? Here's the thing: DeSantis is not a great campaigner. DeSantis is not a charismatic, dynamic speaker. DeSantis has got the governing goods. DeSantis has the thing that we should be delivering.
Mere competence.
Mere competence, yes. But you have to sell mere competence. And so the question is, how do you do that? And the answer is this is what I'm trying to get to with the message, right? If it were up to me to construct the message out of the results, out of the evidence, right? The data. What won, what didn't won. My construction of Republican values would be, we believe that people can run their own lives better than the government can. And we believe that if parents think that kids are safe to go to school, then they should be allowed to. And we think that that parents have a perfect right not to have their kids indoctrinated against their core beliefs, and we're going to prevent them from doing it by law. And this is what we represent. We believe in individuality, believe in personal people doing their own lives, being left alone by the government. This is the message, and that's why Florida works so well. That's what I would be doing.
The New York Times tried to do a little hit piece on DeSantis last week. These allegations that he was kind of a wild man during his brief career teaching high school. And all I could think is, I hope they do more stories like that because on the stump, on TV, DeSantis can come across as a little chilly, and stories like that just humanize him. They warm him right up. Oh, well, let's find some hot chicks to swear to God he was the best lay they ever had. Just more hit pieces like that, please.
Well, the New York Times headline today was DeSantis is supercharged. So they've had a bit of a turnabout on that. And I would argue that Greg Abbott did the same thing in Texas. In essence, he's not a flashy guy. I've met him in person. The ads that they ran for him were basically showing him in his wheelchair. He had a terrible injury that paralyzed him from the waist down, and so he's in a wheelchair. And they said, he's overcome adversity. He's protecting our border. He is, making Texas a prosperous place where everybody wants to live. And the ads against Beto O'Rourke, who my favorite quote of the day is, Beto O'Rourke, still the most famous Texas Democrat, never to win a race outside of his hometown. That was in the New York Times.
Did you see the meme of him? He's campaigning in Louisiana, and he's spelling his name Beaux or something.
Beto.
But the ads about Beto simply ran his own statements. They had video of Beto O'Rourke going, yeah, hell yes, we're going to take away your AR-15 and your AK-47. And when he was asked, do you believe in abortion up to the last minute or after birth or whatever it was, he said, I believe that's a woman's choice, and they just played him. So he's running around trying to be charismatic. And there was a guy who was one of the last Democrats to hold statewide office. This was in Texas. Nobody does in Democrats. This was back in the 1990s. And he said, well, after the election, the one positive is that we can say we know what model doesn't work. Having rallies for true believers doesn't win elections. And Beto was packing them in at those rallies and then got stomped by Abbott.
At the rate he's going, it's going to be 2046, 2047 before Beta can take my AR-15 away.
Yeah, I know he'd better get on the stick. Yeah. So Abbott and DeSantis, prior to the elections, both did something that I've never seen Republicans do that I'm aware of, at least going back to Reagan. And that is that they fought against the narrative, and they fought against the narrative flawlessly. This business of taking illegal aliens into the country and shipping them to these dark blue places that have always said, we're sanctuary cities. That was the most brilliant political tactic I have ever seen in my life.
And it forced their opponents to say, you're cruel to these immigrants because you're sending them to Democrat states.
Yeah.
Bingo. It
we're
was
a sanctuary
the most
city, but we don't want to provide it.
That's right.
No, and we're glad that they're here in Martha's Vineyard, and we've prepared a nice brunch, and we're gonna wave at them on the bus when they drive them away to immigrant prison, and tell them and thank them for enriching our community and for providing so much diversity and so on. Okay, so what it did was he showed the country what hypocrites these people are, and they are, and that was simply brilliant. Abbott and DeSantis, I don't know to what degree they were working in concert, doesn't matter. They basically said, here are your policies that you're enforcing on us. Enjoy them. And it was enormously effective. And when DeSantis was dealing with the woke stuff in Florida, he's got video of Disney people saying, no, of course we're going to turn your kids into we're going to make them trans, and we're going to make them woke, and we're going to yeah, well, of course we are. And he says, you know what? I've decided that should not be legal. We're just going to say that there should be. He didn't say no liberal indoctrination in K through 12 or whatever. He said no indoctrination, period. And then the left howls, and when Disney starts howling, he says, you guys have a special deal here in Florida, don't you? You've got this kind of special deal that goes back to like 1970 or something like that, where you got your own little economic zone that's not taxed. I think maybe it's time for that to come to an end.
Now that you got your legs under you, yeah.
Now that Walt Disney is now a political organ with a political message, then we don't think we don't think that the Florida taxpayer should be funding a message and to have their own kids taken away from them.
And the way that whole thing got started out is Walt Disney was kind of disappointed with Disneyland, the original theme park in California, because it was fairly small. It is fairly small, and he didn't own any of the property around it. And so you ended up with a lot of sort of some seedy, some cheesy motels and that kind of thing. He was not happy about that. And he figured if he bought some swampland down in Florida, a lot of it, then he could own the whole experience pretty much from the time that you left the airport. And that's what he wanted. And as a part of that, to be able to afford to develop this swampland. I mean, it's just some of the worst land in the country, really. He got this special tax deal from the state of Florida. It was like, well, we can't do anything else with this land. Yeah, come on in. We'll give you the tax breaks. And it's continued like that, even though not only is there Disney World there, but Epcot Center and it's theme park central.
Universal.
Yeah, everybody.
Orlando used to be. I can remember when Orlando was a hitching post. It was the kind of place where you'd water your horses on the way north, right? It was nothing there. And I grew up in Florida, so I went to Disney World in 1972, just prior to their opening, because my dad was a hotel manager, so they had kind of like a week early, and we stayed at the Contemporary Hotel and saw the monorails going through there. So I went to Disney World probably 25 times before I moved to California. Finally went to Disneyland, and since I went to Disney World 20 times, and then I saw Disneyland. At Disneyland, Cinderella's castle looks like Cinderella's tool shed. Looks like Cinderella's guest house, right? So yes, he basically made Orlando Walt Disney, doing what he did there, made Orlando the #1 tourist destination on the planet. Because once Disney was in there, everybody else started to follow suit.
And he stayed out of politics. It was a family-friendly destination. That was the whole point of creating this thing out of the swampland, was to make it family-friendly. And then woke Disney has to make it political. And Tallahassee's right to take their tax privileges away.
But it took guts to do that. It took leadership. It took Ron DeSantis to say, okay, you want to play this? You want to play in politics? Now we're going to play in politics. Okay. You want to politicize our children? Well, now I'm a politician. So now that you're a political entity, here's what we're going to do. By the way, it cost Disney billions of dollars.
One of the things I love about what happened with DeSantis in Florida is that it's not one man. In fact, for the first time since Reconstruction, every statewide office is in the hands of Republicans now. And my understanding is those Republicans all won by like at least 16 points. So
the ground game is amazing.
Yeah. So it wasn't just people saying, oh, we love that Ron DeSantis. And I don't think it was just coattails. It was a sense that Republicans know what they're doing when it comes to governance. They do it effectively. They did everything they could to protect the Florida economy during the pandemic. They care about our kids. They care about freedom. They've made Florida into a welcoming place for everybody. And the governor and others in the state are not intimidated by critics or people in the media, but I repeat myself, who try to slap them down with, these little bantering games that they play in Washington, D.C.
It's a culture war we're in now against the left. It's not an economic war anymore, and DeSantis knows how to fight and win the culture wars.
So to conclude my segment on this, because today I'm talking about the message. I'm talking about what are we about?
Yes.
Right. To conclude that, what I would basically say is Florida works. And Florida works because Florida is free, it is deregulated, it is low taxed. Florida is the example of what happens when you leave people alone to live their own lives. You have a booming economy, you have happy people, your governor wins by 20 points because everybody there, and you're right, it goes all the way down the state. It's not just the governor. Everybody in Florida realizes that Florida is a much, much, much better place to live now than it used to be. And so basically, let's make America Florida again, right? I mean, that's really the message. It's like you've taken something that was a kind of a mess, and you've turned it into the model of how the country could work.
And I think we need to get away from a description, which I read a lot in the media, especially around DeSantis and Abbott, of talking about the culture war. I don't think that serves us well. I think it is if you're going to be a conservative, you're going to be Republicans. My mission is to go out there and debate with Democrats about the family. My mission is to support the family. My mission is to make life better for individuals, to give people an economic opportunity, to protect their rights, to give them justice justice and things like that. So I'm not going to engage in culture war repartee with people just because that gets, minutes on CNN and they'll call me in as a guest, or Fox News. But if Republicans can be seen, for example, on the whole abortion issue, which we talked about in the recent weeks and said, well, nobody really cares about abortion. It's mostly the economy. And now exit polling is showing that in states where Democrats won big, that abortion was a big deal there. But I think it's not so much where Republicans stand on life. It's our inability to state it in ways that show that we respect women, that we love children, and that we want to heal the hurting.
Yeah.
Right. So somebody better sit down at their typewriter and start banging out some common themes that everybody in the country that every Republican in the country can say, this is what we are about.
And we're just the guys to do it.
And Kevin
and
McCarthy
we're just
is not
the guys to do it. No, none of them are. None of them are.
I think her name is Ronna McDaniel. I think that's her name.
That sounds right.
That's
I
an
couldn't pick her out of a
name.
lineup, though.
That's right. I saw a picture of her and I was like, I vaguely recall that person. So, and frankly, I think despite all the, lukewarm news, and we don't really even know yet who's in control of the House of Representatives. We don't know yet who's in control of the Senate. But despite that, I'm not just being naive when I say, let's see where we were effective and what we can learn from there. Yeah. Not necessarily saying, okay, let's take Florida and then macro that over the entire country, because the entire country is not Florida. But what can we learn from strategies and processes and approaches that we can then transfer and learn from? I'm doing a lot of reading right now on continuous improvement processes in business. And those, the people who fail at continuous improvement efforts are the people who say, oh, I see the tools, the techniques that they're using over at Toyota. I'm going to get those tools and bring them into my company. Those efforts fail because it's a cultural shift. It's that idea that day by day, little by little, we're going to make everything better, and frequently we're going to actually take great leaps forward by doing massive sort of revolutionary things. But it's ingrained in the people that that's what we're about. And I think if we can get that ingrained in Republicans, that we are the happy people, we are the happy, the pursuit of happiness people, we are the justice people, we are the liberty people, we are the people who respect women and love children and want to heal the hurting. That instead of engaging with Democrats and basically saying, okay, I'll go play in your stadium by your rules, we frame that out for ourselves and say, here's the positive future that we stand for. And so today we would, if that had been in effect 2 years ago, today we would not be saying, morning in America with a U, but without a U.